The following podcast is brought to you exclusively by the Rad Rob Radio Network.
Welcome to the Leadership Evolution Podcast, where we explore what happens after the build. I'm Luke Mickelson, founder, leader, and someone who's walked through the challenges of growing an organization, letting go, and learning how to lead in a completely new way. This podcast is for founders, executives, and leaders who are navigating growth, identity, and the tension between control and legacy. Because building something great is only the beginning. Learning how to evolve with it, that's the real work. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Leadership Evolution Podcast. I'm your host, Luke, as you know, and it's good to have everybody back. And I am excited for today. Today's guest is Eric Nitzberg, an executive coach and trusted advisor who has spent more than 2 decades helping CEOs and senior leaders navigate growth, change, and the human side of leadership. He has coached hundreds of executives across the technology, software, and life sciences industries, including more than 150 leaders from a Fortune 100 global technical company. Eric has also served as a communication coach for none other than Stanford Graduate School of Business, awesome, where he has taught future business leaders the power of authentic communication and deep listening. His work centers on helping leaders grow not just in performance, but in self-awareness, influence, and lasting impact. Eric, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, Luke. It's great to meet you and great to be on the show.
Did I get all that right?
Yeah. Yeah, you even pronounced my name right, which is not a given.
Nitzburg, I know. I took a shot. I usually ask before and I forgot, but hey.
You nailed it.
We're on a good start today.
Yes, starting on a good way.
Well, let me kick this off with a question here. You've worked with hundreds of CEOs and senior executives in your career. What separates leaders who continue to evolve from those who eventually just plateau?
The first thing that came to my mind when you said that is maybe something that's going to surprise you. But I actually think that leaders who have imposter syndrome are highly motivated by that imposter syndrome to constantly keep improving. And so I actually think that the kind of doubts that a lot of CEOs and senior leaders have about their own ability to tackle the big challenges that they're trying to tackle, I think those doubts, I won't say that they are the one and only thing that result in success, but I do think that they are counterintuitively one of the things that helps drive success.
Sure, absolutely. Confidence in themselves.
Or a lack of confidence in themselves.
Or the lack. You mentioned a very common thing, imposter syndrome. You know, we hear that a lot, especially in this podcast, and as it kind of relates to founder syndrome. What is imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome is when someone worries or feels like they're not up for the challenge that they're tackling, and they feel like the reason the word imposter syndrome is used is they feel like an imposter. They feel like, gosh, if everybody really knew what I was thinking and feeling, they would know that I'm not the real deal here. You know, I'm faking it. I'm doing the best I can. I seem to have everybody fooled, but but I'm not fooled because I know, what I really am, and those are the emotions of it.
Yeah. I think a lot of founders, even myself, I would have to admit, have gone through that. And maybe from periods of time, different periods of time in my career, it seems like, you start questioning yourself, right? What is it that causes leaders to do that?
Well, it's interesting because the statistics are that people who are more junior don't tend to have as much imposter syndrome. It's like 20 to 30% of people who are more on the front lines. But when you get up to senior executives, the statistic goes up to something like 65%.
Wow.
have imposter syndrome, and among CEOs, it's closer to 3/4 of CEOs at some point have feelings of imposter syndrome. I think what drives it is the scope of the challenge that they're facing. And if you think about it, it's pretty rational, right? You're climbing this big mountain you've never climbed before, and you worry you may not be up to it. You look at the steep slope ahead of you, and all the unknowns, and I think that it's the situation that they're in that results in those feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I can't believe the statistics are that high, maybe as high as 75%. And it does make sense, right? Especially in organizations that are very successful. I mean, they say it's lonely at the top. I know that's a different connotation for a different reason, but when you're at the top and you're covering so much and handling, or at least overseeing so much, man, inadequacy is a real thing, or at least the feeling is a real thing, especially in industries that maybe you're not expertise in. And as your organization gets bigger and broader, right? Isn't that just how it goes? I mean, you're diving into different marketing techniques and strategies and campaigns that we have no idea what that's about. And I can only imagine CEOs, and this is right along in your wheelhouse, CEOs that started their company 30 years ago, or gosh, even 15 years ago, are now dealing with technology, particularly AI technology, that they're so far behind, and it's so rooted, and I'm kind of pointing at myself here as well, so rooted in how we used to do things, knowing that we've got to do things differently. My gosh, how do you help leaders work with those feelings and deal with growing technology?
Well, I think for the feeling part of it, and this is timely because I just came out of one of these exact conversations earlier today. I think it starts with them recognizing that they're not alone in those feelings, and that the feelings are not necessarily in and of themselves bad. I mean, they're not predictive of bad outcomes. If anything, like I was alluding to earlier, I think that they can be highly motivating. There have even been there's even some evidence that people that have those kind of feelings when they're under a lot of pressure work harder and do better than people that don't have those kind of thoughts and feelings. And so it's not intrinsically a bad thing to have that kind of, to have an imposter syndrome. It's just uncomfortable.
Sure.
And it's the discomfort that people struggle with. And then for that, what I encourage them to do is to try to change the conversation that they're having with themselves in their head, to try to think about, what I like to say is, if a friend of yours came to you with exactly the kind of thoughts and feelings that you have right now, what would you say to that friend? How would you support them? What would you say to them? Well, try to say those things to yourself in your own head. Try to change the conversation in your head to something a little more positive about your capabilities. And I think that can help. In terms of the technology, and kind of the second part of what you were talking about, I do think that the speed of change in technology is one of the great challenges of our time and opportunities of our time. And just the world has become a more complicated, fast-moving, fast-changing place. And the closer you are to the top of a company, especially a big company, you're really exposed to that world. Like you really, everything that's going on in the world, if you're at the top of a bigger company especially, all the big things happening in the world are relevant to you.
Sure.
There's something happening in politics, it's relevant to you. Something in technology is relevant to you. Climate change is relevant to you, or whatever. Regardless of what side of these different issues you're on, the issues themselves are ones that you have to engage with. And I think that my there isn't a simple piece of advice on we'll do this and you're going to be fine, because it's really hard to navigate all of that. But I do try to help leaders around things like their mindset, their approach to their own well-being and resilience, how they think about leading their teams. I mean, there are definitely ways to try to succeed in the middle of all that.
Sure.
But it's not easy.
You've spent, your career working heavily with leadership, helping leaders. And number one, what got you into this? Were you an entrepreneur, young, dream of business and leading a business and all that? I mean, where did this start for you?
So my first couple of years out of college was in retail and banking. Like I was a bank teller. I mean, I just had some jobs right out of college.
Sure.
And then I had a calling to the ministry. And so I spent 12 years working in a church in a series of progressively responsible leadership roles, and eventually leading the whole organization, and then at the end I was more leading the business side of the organization. This was a big church here in Silicon Valley. And so that was my real first passion and calling, was that work. And then at some point I kind of reached a point where I didn't see a path forward in that anymore. And it was, I really got to almost like a dead end where I didn't know how I was going to keep doing that. And I was kind of burned out. And I had some experience with coaching in the last 5 years that I was doing that. I studied coaching. I thought that would make me a better leader. And I had a couple of people that coached me. And I loved it. I loved the being coached. I loved the coaching. I've always loved learning. And so I left the church, not quite sure what I was going to do. And I kind of I tried some different things, but I kind of fell into coaching. And then a year or two later, I really committed to it and dug in. So that was my journey to get here.
Interesting. As you talked with leaders that are transforming or evolving rather, what usually, in your experience, what has caused that? Is it a crisis that leaders go through, success, failures, or is it just totally something else?
I think leadership it's a journey, and right. It has all of those things. It's a complex journey, and so I think people learn, depending on their attitude, I think they learn through all of that. They experience downtimes, something that feels like a failure. Hopefully they learn from that. Their company is growing like crazy. I was just saying to somebody earlier today, like one of the great things about being a leader in a growing company is you have to grow. Like you have, for the company to grow. Yeah, you have to grow personally in order for the company to grow, or for you to keep up with the company's growth. Like you have to grow as a leader.
Right.
And so I think there are all kinds of opportunities as a leader to keep learning and growing. And I think the best leaders and the ones who are the most successful and do the best have a mindset that they're going to learn from all of it. That's it. It really is an excitement about learning and growing. Is one of the key things that I think helps a leader grow and that helps a company grow.
Right. Well, this podcast, we focus in on obviously the evolution or growth. It's kind of the synopsis or similar word to use. As and part of growth or transformation, right? Especially when you're dealing with a CEO or a founder of an organization, they become very, what I call identity fused with that organization, right?
100%.
There's undeniably, you cannot avoid that. You're eventually, it's like in my situation, I shared that, 99.9% of the people on this planet only know me because of my organization, right? Yeah. And when it first started, it was totally the other way around, right? They only know the organization because of me. And this identity fusion that happens, which, by the way, has to happen, needs to happen if you're going to be successful, right? It's just, you have to have that passion, in my opinion, to be able to grow something to the level that you want to. And that's pros or cons, goods or bads. That's what's going to happen. When an organization grows and starts evolving, and the leader does as well, forced to evolve. Like, for example, my situation, I went from just a farm kid from Idaho and nobody right? Not that I'm anybody special, but farm kid from Idaho to CNN hero, right? Cover of a Lay's potato chip bag, right? These you're thrust into this that puts you out of your comfort zone. What is it about, or I should say, how is the best way that you found to let leaders know, hey, at some point in your organization, it's going to evolve differently than you, and this identity that you've tied and fused together will start separating?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic and a really good point. I think there's a danger also lurking in that identity fusion that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Because if your work is your whole life, then what happens if you get ousted, from your company, or what happens if the state of your company then becomes your mood. If the company's doing great, you're doing great. If the company's going through a hard time, you're going through a hard time. And then I've also seen it for people who are late in their careers and they're, maybe they're thinking about retiring or doing something else, maybe getting on some boards or whatever they want to do. Right. And then it becomes very hard to step away, because who am I if I'm not doing this? Right. This is what I am. And even very thoughtful, smart people who are, have a lot of emotional intelligence, and they're very, deep thinkers on all of these kind of topics, they still confront that exact issue. I've seen it happen, where they're like, well, I don't know if I want to walk away, because then, like, who am I? And they may not even say it that way, but that's what they're often feeling. So I think that's the danger in it. I do think that, you're pointing to kind of a dichotomy, which is, on the one hand, you need to have that level of psychological ownership in order to be successful. But on the other hand, you need a little breathing room between who you are and who your company is in order to be okay, in order to take care of yourself. So I think it's really straddling that tension between those two things. That's probably like a lifelong thing to work on. But I do recommend that leaders try to have a little bit of daylight between their sense of who they are and their role in their company, even if they're.
I wish someone would have told me that, like, when I first started out, because you're 1,000% on target. Because when you establish an organization, you're tied to it, passionately. It becomes your life in a lot of ways, and the more success, come on, that's what us founders and CEOs do. We want success for our organization because it's part of our identity. We associate with it. But as it grows and as more people come in, more management comes in, boards tighten, governance tightens, you're less. I don't want to say use the word shooting from the hip, but it's less reliant on you. You're dumping hats off, things of that nature. This transition of leadership, this falls right into this founder syndrome that I love to talk about and coach on, because us founders, when you reach that, and not just founders, I use that term loosely, I guess, leaders that have built something and have tied to it and have grown it, and now it starts growing past them. I think leaders can start feeling lost. And as that disconnection happens, there are some really odd and strange feelings that come about when this happens. And you said, it happens to great people that are smart, they care about people. But the minute you're not invited to a meeting that you started years ago, or a decision, you know what I'm saying? Or a decision that is critical that you're not even consulted on. You didn't know the meeting happened, that they talked about this decision. I call these things relevance wounds, right? The leader just felt or is just stabbed by a relevance wound, right? What have you seen this in your career? Have you helped coach leaders trying to deal with relevance wounds? Yeah,
for sure. And I think the thing that nobody really tells you, early on is this is a emotional journey as much as it is any other kind of journey. And so if your organization is growing, you want it to grow. Part of that, it hinges on your ability to let go. Mm-hmm. And so it's a little bit like parenting in a way. I don't know if you're a parent, but
Yeah.
You as your child doesn't need you as much, or they need different things from you. And so you have to be willing to let go of what they were and who they were and what your role was, and step back and look at, like, what is this, following the analogy, what does this organization really need from me today? And that has nothing to do with what I want. It may, if I'm lucky, maybe it has something to do with that, but it really is, it needs what it needs. And so you have to be big enough or open-minded enough to really keep seeing that and reassessing that. And the piece around letting go in particular, I think, is very, very challenging for people. And they don't always see it when it's happening. But I think your relevance wound, that's a great term. And I think it speaks to, like, exactly that place where, your example where, okay, there's a meeting, like you started the whole thing and now there's a meeting, they don't want you there anymore. It's like, well, maybe they don't say it that way, but you really aren't needed and you probably would be getting in the way.
Right.
But then the truth is that there's something else that's more important for the organization for you to do with your time.
Right.
And so it really isn't about you. It's about the mission. It's about the organization. And that can be hard to get your arms around.
Well, because it always has been. I think, especially in the beginning, it has been about them. I mean, they wore all the hats, they answered all the questions, they dealt with all the problems, and that, the discipline I share when someone's going through some founder syndromes and starts experiencing some really, really deep relevance wounds. I think it's important for leaders to understand that, and I had to face this myself. You're dumping hats off. Your organization's getting bigger and it needs more help and more specific help and help that's better than what you've given it, because you're hiring skill sets that you don't have. So you start feeling a little less needed, right? Which is, in one hand, great, right? And I've always thought, and other leaders have thought that, it's amazing, because now I've got people that are professional. They know how to do this better than I do. I don't have to worry about it. Boom, done. Awesome. But you also start feeling a little less needed. Yeah. And it is very hard and difficult to understand the transition, if you will, of need doesn't always equate, and shouldn't in a lot of cases equate, to the value or worth that you are to your organization, especially the founder.
Yeah, I was I had a conversation recently with a CEO around just this, where the organization had grown, and he was saying kind of what you're talking about, where it's like, well, I'm not even sure. And this is the fear. The fear is like, maybe they don't really need me anymore. They could really run without me. And my comment, and this is where my head always goes in this kind of conversation. My comment is, look, you just don't see how vitally important you are to the organization. Like, it's just that the things that you're doing now are different than they used to be. So number one, you've built an amazing organization so that it doesn't need you for some of those operational things that are now happening, or even some of the leadership is not, you're not leading everything anymore. There's leaders under you now.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you've become irrelevant or unimportant. It means, okay, you're looking at, what does this organization need to look like 3 to 5 years from now? You're looking at, are our products heading the right way? You're looking at, if it's a nonprofit, you're looking at, what is our funding pipeline? What kind of relationships are we maintaining and developing for our funding pipeline, for our, what is our vision for the future? And are we heading the right direction? And who's taking care of all these extraordinary people that I've hired, and who's helping manage their career? Well, that's all still you. Like, that's all in the CEO role. And it doesn't go away. And what happens, though, is that the person sitting in that chair, they don't feel like, because they're not as much in the operations, they're not as much in like the day-to-day or whatever used to be the job, then they feel like, well, maybe they just don't need me, but they desperately need you. They desperately need your leadership, your vision, your whatever it is, fundraising or planning, and all the things that are the real work of being a CEO. All of that is real work. And if you weren't doing it, the organization would start to lapse. Somebody would need to do it. If it wasn't you, somebody else would need to do it. And usually the the founder is the best, well, not always, but the founder is so well equipped because of their institutional knowledge and their knowledge of the market and everything else. Like usually they're just the right person to do that.
Yeah. And in a nonprofit, founders become very valuable in their next stage of role of life, if you will, because it's their story, and especially in the nonprofit space, I think a story is really what, quote, sells it to the public or sells it to donors and volunteers and things of that nature, because you're solving a problem. Typically the mission's solving a problem or helping or whatever, raising awareness and things of that nature, but people resonated with it. It's I tell people, listen, I'm a farm kid from Idaho. I'm nobody, right? Anybody can make a difference in the world. So as founders start feeling these relevance wounds, right, and they got stabbed, in my experience, and I share this with you, Eric, man, you've been great to talk to. I could have used you 5 years ago, brother. Well, I'm just being honest. Going through some of this stuff, you feel like, I think founders feel, they know in their head, listen, everything's great, everything's run smooth. This is what we want. The company's successful. I'm bringing people in. My board's tightening. These are all the things I've dreamed for and worked for. Why am I feeling this way? And better yet, and here's my question to you: what can I do about it? Like, how do I get myself out of my own head? You know what I'm saying?
I think one thing that you can do, very practically speaking, is to create a job description for yourself, or write down what your
role.
Yeah, what is your actual role today? Forget about what you used to do, or what you thought you should be doing, or what you've delegated. But try to get outside yourself, and maybe get help. Maybe a colleague or a board member, a friend, or an advisor, whatever, can help you with this. But try to really describe at its best what you really want your role to be, and spend some real time on it. Because when you dig into that, you're going to realize there's a lot on that list. And that's what the organization really needs from you. And there's probably a growth path for you. It's not like you're at the end of the line. There's a growth path for you. So I think that to kind of tether yourself to the reality of how important you really are and what your job is and why it matters, I think that's one pathway that can help. I think another pathway is to just talk to people about what you're feeling. A lot of founders, a lot of leaders are more isolated than they should be. And I think isolation is like the most poisonous thing. It's the worst thing for those kind of feelings, because then you're stuck in, you said, how do you get out of your own head with this? Well, you get out of your own head by letting somebody else in your head. I like to say, like, being in somebody's head could be a dangerous thing, but you really want other people to be in your head so that you can get the stuff out of your head, get yourself out of your head. So I think that there are different ways to do that. You can hire somebody like yourself, or hire a coach or an advisor. But you can also do it with close friends or colleagues if you think particularly if they also are founders. There are also organizations where leaders gather, founders gather, to share experiences with each other. I know, like, the one coming to mind is YPO, Young Presidents Organization. That's usually for younger folks, I think under 45, but that's just one example where they gather on a monthly basis and they share stories with each other. They talk about what they're going through. They talk about their feelings. In other words, the short version of that is community. You have to have some kind of community where you can open up, feel safe enough to open up, with trusted people about what you're feeling.
Right.
That's, I think, the best path to working through some of those feelings, because you find out you're not alone, and it's okay. Yeah. You get some of that stuff out, and then you kind of frees you up to move forward.
Yeah, I've noticed, number one, like admitting it to yourself. That's some of the hardest things too. It's like, you get stabbed by a relevance wound, right? And the first thing you want to do is protect, right? You want to guard. You want to feel relevant. So what do? You you defend, right? You get out and defend. And let's be real with each other. Most of the time when you're stabbed and you go to defend yourself, both in reality and in an analogy, it's aggressive, right? It's not a pleasant, very thought out, usually articulated defense. It becomes very harsh. It becomes very critical, very, very emotionally driven. And I've seen and heard and read a lot of founders, especially nonprofit leaders or leaders in organizations. They do it too often or too much or too intense. They get kicked out of their own organization,
Oh, yeah.
And how horrible that is for leaders that, and I think it's just as important. Let me ask you, Eric, I like your thoughts on this. I think it's just as important for a leader or a founder who's dealing with the board of directors, dealing with, other management in the organization, and they're trying to evolve in their leadership process. I don't think other people, how could they? Their board, their leaders, I don't think they understand what the founder's going through, right?
It depends on their background. If they're founders themselves, they would know.
Sure.
And a lot of times board members, depends on the organization, but a lot of times in corporations, a lot of times board members are, leaders themselves and, CEOs and so forth. But, one of the things that you said that kind of struck me was like you defend yourself against these relevance wounds and it's aggressive, and you're defending yourself. But the irony there is you're defending yourself. The very act of defending yourself, you're hurting your organization. It's your instinct is just dead wrong in those moments.
Yeah.
You feel like something's being taken away from you. And most of the time, what's really happening is your organization is trying to grow.
Yeah.
And the reason people get kicked out, partly it's because of the attitude, and if you're aggressive and so forth, that would do it.
Yeah.
Part of it is you're standing in the way. The organization is trying to grow, and you're saying, "No, don't grow. No. I can't let go. I don't want you to grow. It's too hard for me personally for you to grow because I'm not ready for you." It's like you've got a teenage kid, and you're like, "No, you can't go. You can't go to that party. You can't go on that date. You can't do whatever. You can't go to college. I need you to stay the way you were." Well, that's not going to end well.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same, for organizations. The organization wants to grow. People under you probably want to grow. They want to become, more. They want to be leaders. They want to lead of their own accord. You got to get out of the way. Let them do that.
Yeah.
It's not. It takes a lot of letting go, but you got to do it.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like that as leaders, at least I'll just speak for myself. I know that, I know that that's what I want, and I know that's what that is. Yeah. But when you go through it, especially when you feel like you're the only one that's going through it.
Well, that's the thing.
That's the thing is, and that's when I was trying to find counseling, coaching, taking medication to, trying to deal with, I don't know what's going on in my head, right? Oh my gosh, you're so frustrated. You're getting stabbed all the time. No one knows what's going on. You feel like no one understands it, right? I don't even understand it. How can someone else understand it? And so, founder syndrome, what I call, is a very much real thing. And one of the main reasons why I started this podcast, Eric, because it's so detrimental, and it hurts a leader. It hurts what he's shooting for is, your identity. And I get it now, obviously, because your identity's been tied to this organization from the beginning, right? And now as it's growing, it's evolving differently because it's not a human being. It's a business. It's a corporation. It's a company, and you're an individual that's got feelings and families and friends and other things that's going on. This corporation doesn't give two craps about you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you give a lot for it, right? And so when you see what it feels like being separated from it, and you don't know how to deal with it, you weren't ready or taught that that's going to happen. Yeah, that's frustrating.
I think also for mission-driven leaders, purpose-driven leaders, nonprofit or corporate who care passionately about the mission of their organization, trying to do some good in the world, trying to help people. I think that's a little bit different too, or unique, if you're leading an organization and it's, you think of it as, you care about it a lot, you want the business to be successful, you want it to make some money and so forth, you can definitely get tied up in that, get your identity tied up in that. But if it's deeper than that, like you really care, with your whole heart about some issue in the world, like yours, I mean, you're basically helping kids, right, have a better life, have a better experience, start their life in a better way, in such a basic, important way. I really admire what you do. Then it is partly about you, but also it's what's tied up in there too, is like, well, wait a minute, this is so important for the world, and this isn't just about me, this is about the world, but I need to do it because, I care the most. And I'm not quite sure where I'm going with that, but I think there's a layer of commitment that happens there, psychological ownership that happens there for purpose-driven leaders that's even higher than it is for, say, leaders that don't have that core intense feeling of purpose in what they do.
Well, and I think some of it too, if you're a CEO of a for-profit company, right, you do sit at the helm of a lot of things, right? I mean, you have a lot of control and decision making, and that's great. In a nonprofit, no one owns the organization, right? And the people that are the big decision makers, if you will, right? The board of directors, oftentimes these people may have never done 1 ounce of your mission, and that's, in fact, I was talking to a friend of mine. He's an executive director, started a mission. He says, man, I was getting direction from a guy that has never put together 1 foster care case, and that's what we do. He's never done one, and he's telling me what to do. I'm like, oh yeah, I know. I know that can be very tough, and so and let's get back to this right here. So you coach CEOs, leadership. Leaders and leadership on leadership habits, right? On what they can do to become better leaders and how to evolve. What would you say to be the most important thing that you coach on or you teach on or that they have to deal with? That's a loaded question right there. So when it comes to habits, what would be the most important one and why?
Well, it's hard to narrow down to just one, but let me pick. Let me start with self-awareness. I think one of the most important qualities for leaders is to reflect and to look at themselves, to find ways to get to know themselves as deeply as they can, and to spend time kind of reflecting, kind of pull themselves out of their day-to-day grind and the intense busyness of running their business, growing their business, and to step back and ask themselves some questions like, what's truly important to me, and where do I really want this organization to go? Who am I, basically, and what are my strengths? Where do I need to grow? Where do I need to improve? Those kinds of questions. I think it's important to reflect on those things periodically, regularly, because the more you know yourself and the more you know your own strengths and weaknesses, the better you can deploy your strengths and hire people who compensate, who can fill in the areas where you don't have strengths. And so I do think self-awareness is one of the most important things for effective leadership in terms of a habit. It's something that you can build a habit around, reflection for your self-awareness. I think that actually I just came out of a meeting a little while ago where we were talking about prioritization, and the idea that was on the table was, are you clear on the top 3 things that you are most important that you want to be working on? Say this month or this week, you should always know what those are, and in order, and particularly if you're really busy, because it's very easy to get pulled off of those. And if you know what those are and you keep those front of mind, you can really drive those priorities. You can make better decisions about your time and energy and what you say yes to and no to for the organization, but especially for your own time. So I think prioritization is a really critical habit.
Excellent.
Yeah. And I'll say one more, which is, and just because it came to mind, I'm not sure if this is a habit, but I think it's the foundation of good leadership is vision. You really have to know where you're going. Like, where are you trying to get? And as the leader at the top of your organization, whether that's, 3 people or 300 people or 3,000 people, you need to be crystal clear on what that, as best as you can, given the changing world, you need to be crystal clear on what you want your organization to look like, where you want it to go, impact you want it to have, not just this month, but, 1 quarter from now, 1 year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. It's harder to do that in some ways now because the world is changing so fast. Yeah. But I think even in a changing world, leaders are the ones who shape what the world will look like in the future. And we create those changes by our vision. And so I think you can't overstate the importance of a clear, inspiring vision that's shared with your whole organization. It's the foundation, it's the bedrock of good leadership.
I like that. That's great. Eric, you've been doing this for what, 25 years plus? Yeah,
well, I've been a coach for it's like 2 decades, is what I say. Wow. I think it's 18 years this year.
Wow.
And I've been doing leadership, like people development work, for over 25 years. And
in 25 years, leadership, in your own definition, how has leadership changed? Or has it?
Fundamentally, I don't think that leadership has changed. I think the things that make a leader an effective leader, vision, how they take care of their people, some of the qualities that I believe make a good leader, like honesty, transparency. I think that the basics have not really changed. And in fact, one of my favorite books on leadership is called The Leadership Challenge, which is a multi-decade study of what makes people want to follow a leader, essentially what makes a great leader. Their research hasn't really changed over the decades that they've been doing it. The outcomes have been pretty much the same across cultures and across different geographies and different kinds of organizations, different industries. So I don't think that leadership has changed. What has changed dramatically is the context. The world has changed. So we're now people are leading in a more complex, fast-changing world with a technology-driven world. It's a very, very different world, right, from what it was 25 years ago.
Wow. Well, you're 25 years in, Eric. What is, speaking of legacy, speaking of 5-year, 10-year plans, what does yours look like?
My vision is to work with some of the world's most senior leaders and to see their highest potential and to help them achieve it. And so I'm on a path of trying to see how I can magnify my impact by working with people who themselves are leading at scale, and having a tremendous impact themselves. So that's my aspiration. That's what I want to do. And along the way, I coach a lot of people at different levels that also are very meaningful to me. But that's my vision.
Last question here, Eric, and you've been great. So thankful for you being on the podcast today and the show. My audience is gonna love it. And speaking of the audience, a lot of it is centered around founders and CEOs. What's the one bit of advice for especially a start out guy or gal that wants to start an organization, is looking at, feeling it, is going to town, right? Sacrificing all of this. What's the best advice you'd give them?
Wow. One piece of advice.
I know, such an unfair question, by the way. I've been asked this before and I'm like, that's so unfair.
The truth is, it really depends on what they're in.
Exactly.
What the advice would be, right? But I think apart from like hang in there would be one thing. But I think that I think focus is very important. Mm-hmm. And particularly, well, for leading any stage organization, for the CEO, the founder, it is so easy to get pulled in 1,000 different directions and 1,000 different ideas. I remember when I was starting my own business, and it was just me waking up every morning. I had no clients, and try to figure out, what am I going to do with today? How am I going to, what am I supposed to do? I don't even know I want to do this thing. What am I going to do?
Sure.
So one of the things that helped me the most were, get some good advice. I had an advisor starting fairly early on. My advisors have helped me tremendously. Having a business plan makes all the difference in the world.
Sure.
A business plan is a forcing function to force you to focus.
Yeah.
If you create a business plan, you make 1,000 decisions when you put that plan together, and those decisions get you focused in a direction. And yeah, your plan's going to change. You're going to change. You learn things, especially early on. You make some mistakes and you learn things. But it is very helpful to have a plan that lets you focus. So I think I would boil it down probably to focus, but I would unpack it by saying, have a plan.
Yeah.
And then I would add, have get help.
When I was asked that question, the only thing that came to mind was, which is kind of similar. I said patience. Just that's a very practical one. Yeah, it'll happen when it happens. Don't be lazy, but just be patient with it. So that's great. Eric, you've been fabulous. Thanks for your time and for your willingness to come on the show and share what a great knowledge that you have for leadership, people wanting to be and dealing with leadership, especially the evolution of it. How do we get a hold of you, brother?
You can just look me up online, check me out using your favorite AI or Google my name, or you can go to our website at SierraLeadership.com.
You guys heard it right there from the man, the myth. Are you a myth yet?
I don't think so. I think I actually exist, so I'm not a myth.
Yeah, you're still around. Hey, brother. Seriously, thanks for being on.
Thanks, Luke. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for joining me on the Leadership Evolution Podcast. If something in today's conversation challenged you, stretched you, or made you think a little differently, that's the point. Growth always starts with awareness. And if you are struggling in your journey, if you feel like you are fading away from what you have built, visit my website, lukemickelson.com, and learn how you can take back your confidence and create lasting legacy. If you found value in this episode, please share it with another leader who may be in the middle of their own evolution. And remember, your role as a leader isn't just to build something successful. It's to build something that lasts. Build what outlives you.